In the cold depths of space, where silence reigns eternal and stars burn like distant funeral pyres, loyalty becomes the rarest currency of all. Species rise and fall based on their capacity for abandonment, and the galaxy has long since learned that survival belongs to those who cut their losses and run. But what happens when the most primitive species in known space, one that barely managed to crawl beyond their own solar system, possesses something that advanced civilizations have forgotten? What happens when a dying alien, cast out by her own people for a crime she didn't commit, discovers that Earth's creatures don't understand the concept of leaving their pack behind? Some bonds transcend biology. Some loyalty burns brighter than dying suns. And, sometimes, the most human thing in the universe isn't human at all. This is the story of Zara 7, the last of her kind, and Rex, a German shepherd who taught the galaxy what it truly means to never abandon your own. The escape pod tumbled through space like a wounded bird, its hull scarred by plasma burns and emergency patches that wouldn't hold much longer. Inside, Zara 7 pressed her scaled hands against the viewing port and watched her home fleet disappear into the void. No rescue beacon. No final transmission. Nothing but the cold mathematics of abandonment. Her people, the Veilthran, had perfected the art of survival through calculated cruelty. When resources ran low, they jettisoned the weak. When territory became contested, they sacrificed the expendable. When one of their own was accused of treason, they didn't waste time on trials or evidence. They simply opened the airlock and moved on. Zara's crime had been refusing to execute prisoners from a human research vessel. Her punishment was exile in a failing life pod with barely enough power to reach the nearest inhabited system. The irony wasn't lost on her, she'd been condemned for showing mercy to the very species her fleet had been ordered to study and eliminate. The pod's navigation system flickered to life, displaying the closest habitable world. Earth. A primitive blue marble orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, populated by bipedal mammals who had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. According to Veilthran intelligence, humans were soft, illogical creatures prone to emotional decision-making and inexplicable attachments to inferior life forms. Perfect, Zara thought bitterly. She'd die among the weak, just as her people had intended. The pod shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere, emergency thrusters firing in short bursts to slow their descent. Zara strapped herself into the pilot's seat and watched the planet grow larger through the viewport. Vast oceans. Swirling white clouds. Continents covered in green vegetation and the geometric patterns of civilization. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight. The crash came hard and fast. The pod slammed into a forested hillside, carving a smoking trench through pine trees before coming to rest in a clearing. Emergency systems shrieked warnings about hull breaches and atmosphere loss. Zara fumbled with her emergency gear, pulling on a breathing mask and checking her universal translator. The device was military-grade, designed to parse any known language within hours of exposure. She activated the pod's emergency beacon and waited. According to the scanner, she'd landed approximately 30 kilometers from the nearest human settlement. Help would come eventually, but whether it would be the kind of help she needed remained to be seen. The hiss of escaping atmosphere told her the pod wouldn't be livable much longer. Zara gathered her survival pack and keyed the emergency hatch. The door blew outward with a sharp crack, and Earth's atmosphere rushed in to replace the pod's failing life support. The air tasted green. Rich and organic and full of scents she couldn't identify. Zara pulled off her breathing mask experimentally and found she could process the oxygen-nitrogen mixture without difficulty. Her people had evolved on a similar world before they'd taken to the stars in generation ships. She stepped out of the wreckage and took stock of her situation. The pod was a total loss, its communication array destroyed and its power core leaking radiation at unsafe levels. The emergency beacon was broadcasting on all frequencies, but it would only last another 48 hours before the backup batteries died. Zara activated her portable scanner and began a systematic survey of the area. The forest was alive in ways that made her scales prickle with unease. Small creatures skittered through the underbrush. Birds called from hidden perches. Insects hummed in frequencies that made her hearing membranes vibrate. Her people lived on sterile ships where every sound was manufactured and every biological process was carefully controlled. This chaos of unregulated life was overwhelming. She was examining a particularly interesting flowering plant when she heard the sound. A low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. Zara froze, her hand moving instinctively to the plasma knife on her belt. The scanner showed movement approaching through the trees. Large. Quadrupedal. Moving with purpose. The creature emerged from the undergrowth like something out of a primitive nightmare. Easily twice the size of any Veilthran, it moved on 4 powerful legs and possessed a massive head filled with sharp teeth. Brown and black fur covered its muscular frame, and intelligent eyes fixed on Zara with unmistakable focus. A predator. And she was trapped in the open with nowhere to run. Zara drew her plasma knife and activated the blade. The weapon hummed to life, casting purple light across the clearing. The creature stopped at the edge of the tree line, tilting its head as it studied her. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing a pink tongue and rows of crushing teeth. Then, it did something that made Zara's blood freeze. It wagged its tail. The gesture was so unexpected, so completely at odds with every predator protocol she'd ever learned, that Zara actually lowered her weapon. The creature took a step closer, then another, its entire body language shifting from threatening to curious. The tail continued its rhythmic motion, and a soft whining sound emerged from its throat. Zara's universal translator crackled to life in her ear, parsing the creature's vocalizations and cross-referencing them with known human languages. After a moment, it offered a tentative translation. Friend? Hello? Help? The creature, the earth creature, was trying to communicate. Zara stared at the animal in disbelief. According to Veilthran intelligence reports, Earth's non-sapient species were simple biological machines driven by hunger and reproduction instincts. They weren't supposed to be capable of complex emotional responses or interspecies communication attempts. The creature took another step forward, its head low and tail still moving in that strange rhythmic pattern. It was clearly powerful enough to tear her apart without effort, but its entire posture suggested submission rather than aggression. When it spoke again, the translator offered additional context. Hurt? Need help? Pack? Pack. The concept resonated through Zara's mind with uncomfortable familiarity. Her own people had abandoned pack loyalty in favor of efficiency thousands of years ago. Weakness was culled. Resources were hoarded. Survival belonged to the strong. But this creature was asking if she belonged to a pack. If she was part of something larger than herself. Zara slowly deactivated her plasma knife and knelt in the grass. The creature's ears perked forward, and it covered the remaining distance between them in 3 quick bounds. Up close, she could see the intelligence in its eyes. This wasn't some mindless predator. This was something that thought and felt and made choices. The creature sniffed her hand with a wet nose, then sat back on its haunches and fixed her with a steady gaze. The translator continued parsing its soft vocalizations. Lost? Alone? Stay? Safe? The simple questions hit Zara like physical blows. Lost? Yes. Alone? Absolutely. But, stay? Safe? Those weren't concepts she'd expected to encounter on an alien world among primitive species. She reached out tentatively and touched the creature's head. Its fur was coarse but warm, and it leaned into her hand with what could only be described as contentment. A low rumbling sound emerged from deep in its chest, not threatening, but somehow soothing. You want to help me, Zara said aloud, testing the translator's ability to convert her words into sounds the creature might understand. The earth animal's tail began wagging again, and it stood up suddenly, circling her twice before taking several steps toward the forest. It looked back over its shoulder and made a soft sound that the translator interpreted as come. Follow. Safe place. Zara looked back at her destroyed pod, then at the creature waiting patiently for her to make a decision. Her people would have calculated the odds, weighed the risks, and chosen the most logical course of action. They would have activated an emergency shelter and waited for rescue that would never come. But this creature was offering something her people had forgotten how to give. It was offering to stay. Zara shouldered her survival pack and followed the earth animal into the forest. Behind them, the pod's radiation warning continued its lonely beeping, counting down the hours until even that last connection to her old life would fall silent forever. The creature led her through winding game trails and over moss-covered logs, always staying close enough that she could reach out and touch its flank if she stumbled. When they came to a steep ravine, it found a safer path around. When she paused to catch her breath, it waited without impatience. As they walked deeper into the alien wilderness, Zara found herself studying her guide with growing fascination. The way it moved spoke of careful thought and deliberate choice. It wasn't simply following instinct, it was making decisions about her safety and comfort that required abstract reasoning. When the sun began to set behind the trees, the creature led her to a shallow cave hidden behind a curtain of hanging vegetation. The space was dry and protected from the wind, with clear sight lines to all approaches. A perfect defensive position. The creature settled near the cave mouth, positioning itself between Zara and any potential threats. Its head remained up and alert, ears swiveling to track sounds in the forest around them. Zara activated a small thermal generator from her pack and settled against the cave wall. The creature watched her with obvious curiosity as she prepared a simple meal from emergency rations. When she offered it a piece of the protein bar, it sniffed politely but didn't take the food. "Not hungry?" she asked. The translator parsed its response as something like "your food. You eat. Guard while sleeping. Guard." This creature intended to stand watch over her through the night. To protect someone it had never met from dangers it couldn't predict. To sacrifice its own rest and safety for hers. The concept was so alien to Zara's experience that she found herself staring at the animal in wonder. Her people had built an empire on the principle that every individual was ultimately expendable. Resources went to those who could take them. Protection was earned through strength or purchased with services. But this earth creature was offering protection freely, asking for nothing in return except her continued existence. As night fell and strange sounds echoed through the forest, Zara watched her guardian settle into alert rest near the cave entrance. Its breathing was steady and calm, but its ears never stopped moving, and its eyes reflected the thermal generator's glow like amber jewels. For the first time since her exile began, Zara felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. She felt safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The emergency beacon would eventually fail. Human authorities would come looking for the crashed pod. She would have to find a way to survive on this strange world with its chaotic abundance of life and its impossible creatures who chose loyalty over logic. But tonight, in a cave on an alien world, guarded by an animal that had no reason to care whether she lived or died, Zara discovered something that would change everything she thought she knew about strength and survival. Tonight, she learned what it meant to have a pack. Zara woke to the sound of voices in the distance. The earth creature, she'd started thinking of it as Rex after the translator parsed what seemed to be its designation, was already alert beside her. Its body was tense, ears forward, focused on sounds beyond her hearing range. When she stirred, it looked back at her with what she was learning to recognize as concern. "Danger," she whispered. Rex's soft whine was translated as unknown. "Many humans. Coming closer. Hide?" Zara checked her scanner and confirmed what Rex had somehow detected first. Multiple human life signs approaching through the forest, moving in coordinated search patterns. They'd found the crash site. She gathered her gear quickly while Rex watched the cave entrance. When she was ready, the big animal led her deeper into the cave system, through passages so narrow she had to crawl. Behind them, voices grew louder, speaking in what her translator identified as English. Definite signs of occupation here. Tracks leading into the forest. Dr. Martinez wants any survivors brought directly to the facility. They emerged from the cave network nearly a kilometer away, hidden by thick undergrowth on the far side of a rocky ridge. Rex immediately began moving again, leading her away from the search party with the confidence of someone who knew every game trail in these mountains. As they walked, Zara found herself marveling at her companion's capabilities. Rex could hear approaching humans long before her scanner detected them. He could navigate complex terrain without hesitation. Most importantly, he could assess threats and plan routes that kept them both safe. Her people would have dismissed Earth creatures as inferior because they lacked technology. But Rex possessed something more valuable than any tool: an intuitive understanding of his environment and an unwavering commitment to her safety. They spent 3 days moving through the wilderness, always staying ahead of the human search teams. Rex proved to be an expert hunter, disappearing for hours at a time before returning with fresh game that he somehow prepared for her consumption. He found water sources her scanner missed and shelter in places that didn't show up on any topographical survey. More importantly, he was teaching her to survive. Rex showed her which plants were safe to eat and which ones to avoid. He demonstrated how to move silently through thick underbrush and how to mask her scent when crossing streams. When she struggled with concepts he couldn't communicate through the translator, he would patiently repeat demonstrations until she understood. It was during one of these lessons that Zara realized something profound was happening. Rex wasn't just protecting her, he was making her stronger. Every skill he shared, every technique he demonstrated, added to her ability to survive independently. Her own people had never taught her anything that would help her survive without them. Veilfran education focused on specialization and dependence. You learned your role in the hierarchy and you stayed in it. Independence was discouraged because independent individuals might challenge the established order. But Rex was actively working to make her more capable, more self-sufficient, more able to thrive without assistance. It was the most generous gift anyone had ever given her. On the 4th morning, they encountered the humans. Zara was practicing the stealth techniques Rex had shown her, moving through a stand of pine trees with minimal sound, when she heard voices ahead. Rex immediately froze, then began backing away, but it was too late. A human in military fatigues stepped into view, weapon raised. Contact. Alien survivor, repeat, we have contact with the alien survivor. More humans emerged from concealment, surrounding them with practiced efficiency. Zara counted 8 soldiers in advanced tactical gear, their weapons trained on her with unwavering precision. Professional military. Probably special forces. Rex positioned himself between Zara and the humans, a low rumble building in his chest. The soldiers immediately adjusted their aim to include him in their threat assessment. Stand down, the squad leader barked. Both of you. Hands where we can see them. Zara slowly raised her hands, but Rex remained tense and ready to fight. The soldiers were professionals, but they'd clearly never encountered anything like him. Their weapons might be effective against human-sized targets, but Rex was built like a mobile fortress. Even if they brought him down, he could probably take half the squad with him. The thought of Rex dying to protect her made Zara's chest tight with panic. Wait, she said, stepping forward slightly. He's not a threat to you. The squad leader's eyes widened at her perfectly accented English. You speak our language? Universal translator, Zara explained, tapping the device behind her ear. I'm not here to cause harm. My ship crashed and he's been helping me survive. One of the younger soldiers lowered his weapon slightly. Sarge, that's just a dog. A big dog, but still. That's not just any dog, another soldier interrupted. Look at the size of that thing. And the way it's positioned. That's tactical awareness. The squad leader studied Rex with new interest. You're telling me this animal has been keeping you alive out here? More than that, Zara said. He's been teaching me to survive. Showing me how to find food and water, how to move without being detected. He's been protecting me from threats I couldn't even identify. Rex's rumble intensified as the soldiers maintained their aggressive posture. The squad leader made a hand signal, and several team members adjusted their positions to get better firing angles. Professional soldiers preparing for violence. That was when Zara learned something new about Earth creatures. Rex exploded into motion with a speed that defied physics. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he was airborne, covering the distance to the nearest soldier in a single bound. But, instead of attacking, he landed between the humans and Zara, his massive frame shielding her from their weapons. The soldiers shouted and tried to reacquire their targets, but Rex was already moving again, positioning himself to block their sight lines. Every time they shifted position, he countered, maintaining his protective stance without ever actually threatening them. It was tactical brilliance executed with perfect restraint. "He's not attacking," Zara called out. "He's just protecting me." The squad leader held up a fist, signaling his team to hold fire. For a tense moment, humans and animals studied each other across the clearing. Then, Rex did something that changed everything. He sat down. Still positioned between Zara and the soldiers, still ready to move if needed, but clearly demonstrating that he wasn't looking for a fight. His tail began that slow, rhythmic movement that Zara had learned meant he was trying to communicate peaceful intentions. "I'll be damned," one of the soldiers whispered. "He's trying to negotiate." The squad leader lowered his weapon and took a careful step forward. Rex watched him but didn't move. Another step. Still no reaction beyond watchful attention. "Ma'am," the squad leader said to Zara, "we're under orders to bring you in for debriefing. Medical evaluation and intelligence gathering. But we're not here to hurt you." Zara looked down at Rex, who was monitoring the entire conversation with obvious understanding. "What about him? The dog?" The squad leader seemed confused by the question. "I don't see why he can't come along. Assuming he behaves himself." That was when Zara realized how fundamentally different humans were from her own species. The Veilthran would have seen Rex as a contamination risk at best, an unnecessary complication at worst. They would have eliminated him immediately to simplify the situation. But these humans were willing to accommodate her companions simply because she asked them to. The journey to the human facility took 6 hours through mountain trails that would have been impossible without Rex's guidance. The soldiers grudgingly admitted that the big animal knew shortcuts and safe paths that weren't on any of their maps. By the time they reached the perimeter, several team members were openly impressed by Rex's abilities. The facility itself was a sprawling complex of prefabricated buildings and defensive positions, clearly designed as a first-contact research station. Scientists in civilian clothing moved between structures alongside military personnel, and Zara could see the distinctive shapes of spacecraft in protected hangars. Dr. Elena Martinez met them at the main gate. She was a small, dark-haired woman with intelligent eyes and the kind of confident bearing that suggested she was accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. "You must be our visitor," she said, extending her hand in what Zara recognized as a human greeting gesture. "I'm Dr. Martinez, Xenobiological Research Division. We've been looking forward to meeting you." Zara shook the offered hand, noting that Dr. Martinez's grip was firm but not aggressive. "I am Zara 7 of the Veilthran fleet. This is Rex." Dr. Martinez looked down at Rex with obvious fascination. "Remarkable. A German shepherd, but larger than I've ever seen. And the way he's positioned himself, he's your guardian, isn't he?" "More than that," Zara said. "He's my teacher. My pack leader. Without him, I would have died in the wilderness." Something shifted in Dr. Martinez's expression. "Pack leader. You're using that term very specifically, aren't you?" "Yes. Rex has taught me what it means to belong to something larger than yourself. To have others who will protect you not because they gain something from it, but because you matter to them." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. That's not how most species approach intergroup dynamics. Most of our first contact scenarios involve entities that prioritize resource acquisition and territorial expansion. Self-interest as the primary motivator. That's how my people operate, Zara admitted. It's why they abandoned me when I became inconvenient. But Rex didn't abandon you. Rex doesn't understand abandonment. It's not part of his nature. Dr. Martinez studied Rex with new interest. "Would you mind if we ran some cognitive assessments? Nothing invasive, just behavioral analysis." I'd like to understand how he processes complex social situations.
Rex looked up at Zara as if he understood the question.
She knelt beside him and scratched behind his ears, a gesture that always made his tail wag faster.
What do you think? She asked him. Want to show these humans how smart you are? Rex's response was translated as new pack? Test first? Prove worth? Protect Zara 7? Dr. Martinez's eyes widened.
He wants to evaluate us. To determine if we're worthy of pack membership.
He's very selective about who he trusts, Zara said.
But, if you prove yourselves, he'll protect you with the same dedication he's shown me. That evening, as Zara sat in a comfortable guest quarters with Rex sprawled across the floor beside her bed, she reflected on how much had changed in less than a week. She'd gone from being in exile facing certain death to being a guest of the very species her people had marked for elimination. The humans had treated her with respect and curiosity rather than suspicion. They'd provided medical care, good food, and comfortable accommodations. Most importantly, they'd welcomed Rex as part of the package, understanding instinctively that separating them would be cruel. Her people would never have made such allowances. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Martinez entered carrying 2 steaming mugs and what appeared to be a large bone.
Hot chocolate, she explained, offering one of the mugs to Zara. And, I thought Rex might enjoy this.
Rex immediately perked up at the sight of the bone, his tail beginning its familiar rhythm. Dr. Martinez set it down near his resting place, and he began examining it with obvious pleasure. Your preliminary medical scans came back clean, Dr. Martinez said, settling into a chair near the window.
No diseases, no biological incompatibilities. Your physiology is remarkably similar to ours, actually. We should be able to share the same environments without significant life support requirements. That's fortunate, Zara said. I was concerned about long-term contamination risks. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. About long-term arrangements.
Dr. Martinez paused to sip her hot chocolate. We've been monitoring communications traffic in this sector for months.
We know about the Veilthran fleet.
We know they're conducting reconnaissance operations in preparation for a larger military campaign.
Zara felt her scales prickle with alarm. You know about the invasion plans? We suspected. Your presence here confirms it.
Dr. Martinez leaned forward.
The question is, what are we going to do about it? I don't understand. You've been living with Rex for a week now. You've learned things about pack loyalty and protective instincts that your people apparently never taught you. What do you think would happen if the Veilthran fleet arrives here expecting to find weak, divided humans?
Zara looked down at Rex, who had finished investigating his bone and was now resting with his head on her feet. The simple gesture of contact and comfort spoke volumes about the bonds that were possible between different species. They would be very surprised, she said quietly. Dr. Martinez smiled.
Exactly. And that's where you come in.
We need someone who understands Veilthran tactical doctrine and military organization.
Someone who can help us prepare an appropriate welcome for your former people. You want me to help you fight them.
We want you to help us show them what they're really up against. Sometimes the best way to avoid a war is to make it clear that you're prepared for one.
Zara considered this as Rex shifted position to rest his massive head across her lap.
The weight was comfortable and reassuring, a constant reminder that she was no longer alone in the universe. Her people had taught her that loyalty was weakness, that emotional attachments were liabilities, that survival required the willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone for advantage. Rex had taught her that strength came from connection, that the willingness to protect others made you more powerful, not less. That a pack working together could accomplish things that no individual could manage alone. The choice wasn't really difficult.
What do you need to know?
The Veilthran fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly where Zara had predicted they would, 30 astronomical units beyond Earth's solar system. 12 dreadnoughts and their escort vessels, enough firepower to sterilize a planet or reduce a spacefaring civilization to rubble.
Commander Keth 9 stood on the bridge of the flagship, studying tactical displays that showed no signs of organized resistance. The primitive humans hadn't even scrambled their pathetic defense forces. No challenge broadcasts. No desperate diplomatic overtures. Just silence from the blue world that had swallowed one of his scouting expeditions. Scan for debris from the research vessel, he ordered his tactical officer. I want to know what happened to Zara 7 and her team. The tactical officer's scales rippled with nervous energy. Sir, we're detecting wreckage in a forested area of the northern continent. Appears to be an escape pod. No life signs in the immediate vicinity. Executed by the primitives, then, Keth 9 said with satisfaction. At least her failure won't contaminate the gene pool. He turned to his communications officer. Signal the fleet. Begin orbital bombardment of major population centers. Standard pacification protocol. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's on a Veilthran military frequency. Keth 9's head snapped around. Impossible. All our equipment was destroyed in the crash. The transmission is definitely Veilthran origin, sir. Audio and visual. Put it through. The main display flickered to life, revealing a face that made Keth 9's blood run cold. Zara 7 sat in what appeared to be a human facility, alive and healthy and definitely not under duress. Worse, she was speaking directly into the camera with the kind of confidence that suggested she was exactly where she wanted to be. Greetings, Commander Keth 9, she said in perfect Veilthran military dialect. I'm sure you're surprised to see me alive. I'm broadcasting from the Earth Defense Coordination Center, where I've been serving as a liaison between human and Veilthran forces. Traitor, Keth 9 snarled. You survived by selling military secrets to primitives. Zara's expression didn't change. I survived by learning something that our people have forgotten. Let me show you. The camera pulled back to reveal the full scope of the command center around her. Dozens of humans worked at advanced tactical stations, monitoring displays that showed real-time positions of every ship in the Veilthran fleet. But that wasn't what made Keth 9's scales crawl with unease. It was the animals. Scattered throughout the command center, large quadrupedal creatures moved with obvious purpose and intelligence. Some wore modified equipment harnesses. Others carried communication devices. All of them displayed the kind of alert awareness that suggested they weren't pets or decorations, they were active participants in whatever the humans were planning. You see, Commander, Zara continued, humans have something we've never understood. They form permanent pack bonds with other species. They call it loyalty, and it makes them incredibly dangerous. As if summoned by her words, Rex appeared beside her chair. The massive animal looked directly at the camera, and Keth 9 felt a chill run down his spine. Those eyes held intelligence and calculation that belonged in a tactical officer's briefing room, not in some primitive beast. This is Rex, Zara said, resting her hand on the animal's head. He's been teaching me about pack dynamics and protective instincts. Would you like a demonstration of what Earth's creatures are capable of when they're defending their territory? Keth 9 was about to cut the transmission when his tactical officer spoke up in a voice tight with fear. Sir, we've got multiple contacts emerging from the asteroid belt. They're moving faster than anything in our databases. The main tactical display lit up with dozens of new signatures, sleek ships moving with impossible acceleration directly toward the Veilthran fleet. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was that each ship was broadcasting identification codes that included both human designations and what could only be described as animal calls. Allow me to introduce Earth's first interspecies space force, Zara said from the main screen. Pilots working in perfect coordination with their animal partners. Humans provide technical expertise and strategic thinking. Their companions provide enhanced sensory awareness and tactical instincts that no computer can match. Keth 9 watched in growing horror as the approaching ships executed maneuvers that should have been impossible. They moved like a pack hunting prey, responding to threats and opportunities with instantaneous coordination. Every time his targeting systems locked onto one vessel,
3 others would shift position to provide covering fire or blocking maneuvers.
Commander, his weapons officer reported, their formations aren't following any tactical doctrine in our databases.
They're adapting faster than our targeting computers can compensate.
On the main screen, Zara leaned forward slightly.
The Veilthran Empire has spent thousands of years perfecting the art of individual survival. You've built an entire civilization around the principle that the strong survive and the weak are discarded.
But humans have built something you've never learned to fight. What? Keth 9 demanded. A family. The first wave of Earthships reached the Veilthran fleet's outer perimeter, and the universe exploded into chaos.
The human vessels fought like nothing Keth 9 had ever seen, covering each other with a dedication that bordered on the fanatical. When one ship took damage, 2 others would immediately move to shield it while it retreated for repairs. When a Veilthran vessel found itself isolated, every Earthship in range would converge on it with pack-hunting precision. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender demands from the human vessels. They're offering to accept our unconditional surrender and guarantee the safety of all crew members."
Guarantee? Keth 9 couldn't hide his amazement. They're offering to protect us? It's what pack animals do, Zara explained from the screen. Once you surrender, you become part of their territory. Their responsibility. Rex taught me that protection isn't something you earn or pay for, it's something families provide because that's what families do.
Keth 9 looked around his bridge at crew members who were beginning to realize that they were facing something completely outside their experience. The Veilthran military was designed to exploit weakness and fear. But these humans weren't operating from weakness, they were operating from a position of strength that came from absolute trust in each other.
"You're telling me," he said slowly, "that humans will fight to protect enemies who surrender to them?" "Not just fight," Zara corrected. "Die."
Rex would die to protect me without hesitation, not because he's programmed to or because he expects something in return, but because that's what pack loyalty means.
And humans have taught that same loyalty to every species they've encountered.
On the tactical display, Keth 9 watched his supposedly superior fleet being systematically dismantled by a force half its size. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, each vessel seeming to know exactly where its companions would be and what they would do. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, no individual vessels trying to secure advantageous positions for themselves. They fought as a single organism with dozens of bodies and one shared purpose.
"Commander," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are broadcasting evacuation procedures for damaged vessels.
They're offering medical assistance to our wounded." Keth 9 stared at the display in disbelief. In the middle of a battle, with their own ships taking damage, the humans were trying to save Veilthran lives.
It was the most tactically insane thing he'd ever witnessed, and it was working.
His crew was beginning to respond to the human offers with something that looked dangerously like trust.
"Sir," the weapons officer called out, "the Dreadnought Retribution is requesting permission to surrender.
They've taken heavy damage and the humans are offering medical evacuation for their wounded."
Before Keth 9 could respond, 3 more ships echoed the request. Then, 5 more.
Within minutes, half his fleet was asking permission to surrender to an enemy that was promising to heal their injuries and keep them safe. "You see the problem with our philosophy," Zara said from the main screen.
"We've taught our people that survival requires abandoning the weak. But humans have proven that survival actually requires protecting them. When you know that your pack will never abandon you, you can take risks that would be impossible otherwise.
You can trust in ways that make you exponentially more powerful." Rex appeared beside Zara again, and this time he did something that made Keth 9's heart stop. The animal looked directly at the camera and made a sound that the translation system interpreted as a question.
"Pack?"
Keth 9 found himself looking around his bridge at crew members who were monitoring human offers of medical aid and protective custody. Young officers who had never learned to expect protection from anyone, who had been trained from birth to view every interaction as a potential betrayal, were hesitantly beginning to hope that maybe these aliens really would keep their promises. "The offer extends to you, Commander," Zara said quietly. "Surrender your remaining ships and the humans will guarantee the safety of every member of your crews."
You'll be guests, not prisoners. You'll be fed and housed, and medical care will be provided for anyone who needs it. No conditions. No demands for intelligence. No forced labor. Why? Keth9 asked. What do they gain from protecting us?
Zara smiled, and, for the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely happy.
They gain new pack members.
Humans don't see species differences as barriers, they see them as opportunities for bigger, stronger families.
Rex made another sound, and the translator offered additional context. Lost pack? New pack. Safe now. Home.
Keth9 looked at the tactical display one more time. His fleet was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely demoralized. The humans had demonstrated that they could destroy every Veilthran ship whenever they chose to, but instead they were offering protection and care to enemies who had come here planning genocide. It was the most powerful demonstration of strength he'd ever witnessed.
Signal all vessels, he said quietly. Stand down weapons and prepare to surrender.
3 months later, Keth9 stood in the same forest where Zara's pod had crashed, watching human and Veilthran children playing together while their animal companions supervised. Rex had become something of a legend among the former fleet personnel, a living example of the loyalty and protection that was possible when different species chose to trust each other. Zara approached through the trees, carrying a young human child who was chattering excitedly in broken Veilthran while a small earth animal, a puppy, the humans called it, trotted along beside them.
Any regrets? She asked as she joined him.
Keth9 watched the puppy attempt to play with a juvenile Veilthran, both creatures stumbling around each other with obvious delight.
About surrendering to primitives? About joining a pack?
Keth9 considered the question as Rex emerged from the underbrush, carrying a stick that several human children had apparently thrown for him to retrieve. The massive animal dropped the stick at Keth9's feet and looked up expectantly, tail wagging with patient hope. 6 months ago, Keth9 would have seen this as a meaningless interaction with an inferior creature. Now he understood that Rex was offering him the chance to participate in something larger than himself. A simple game that built trust and connection between different species. He picked up the stick and threw it as far as he could into the forest. Rex bounded after it with obvious joy, and the human children cheered with delight.
The young Veilthran who had been watching began asking questions about the game, wanting to understand the rules so they could participate too.
No regrets, Keth9 said quietly. For the first time in my life, I understand what it means to be part of something that will never abandon me. Rex returned with the stick and dropped it at the feet of the youngest human child, demonstrating that the game belonged to everyone, not just the strongest or the most clever. The child picked up the stick with obvious delight and threw it with all her might, managing to send it perhaps 3 meters. Rex chased after it with exactly the same enthusiasm he'd shown for Keth9's much longer throw, proving that effort mattered more than results, that participation was more valuable than performance. As the mixed group of children and animals dispersed to explore other games, Zara settled beside a large tree with the human child still in her arms. Rex immediately positioned himself nearby, alert and protective but relaxed.
The Council of Worlds wants to meet with human representatives next month, she told Keth9.
They're curious about species that form permanent alliances rather than temporary resource-sharing agreements.
Are you going? Rex and I are leading the diplomatic mission.
Apparently, we're the best example they have of successful interspecies cooperation. She scratched behind Rex's ears, and his tail began its familiar rhythm.
They want to understand how humans manage to weaponize loyalty.
Keth9 laughed despite himself.
Is that what they think happened here? That's exactly what happened here. Humans took the strongest force in the universe, the willingness to die for your pack, and they shared it with anyone who wanted to learn.
They created a military doctrine based on absolute trust and unbreakable bonds. And now that doctrine is spreading to other worlds.
Now that doctrine is changing everything.
Zara looked out at the forest where the sounds of play and laughter echoed between the trees.
Turns out that abandoning the weak isn't actually a survival strategy, it's a failure of imagination.
When you protect everyone, everyone becomes willing to protect you back. Rex stood up suddenly, his attention focused on something in the distance. A moment later, a group of young Veilthran emerged from the forest, moving with the confident stealth that Rex had taught them. They'd been practicing scouting techniques, learning to move through unfamiliar territory by following their animal guides. Success, one of them reported to Zara. We located the designated targets without being detected by the human observers. And, you stayed with your partners the entire time? Of course. Separation reduces effectiveness and increases danger to the pack. Keth9 shook his head in amazement. 3 months ago, these same youngsters had been raised on principles of individual achievement and competitive resource acquisition. Now they were operating as integrated teams with Earth animals, thinking in terms of collective success rather than personal advantage. The transformation wasn't limited to the young. Adult Veilthran were forming working partnerships with humans and their animal companions, learning skills that made them more capable while building relationships that provided security and emotional support. The concept of abandoning pack members in times of stress had become literally unthinkable. The greatest irony, Zara said as she watched the young scouts settle down for a rest, is that humans are actually the most survival-oriented species in known space. They just understand that real survival requires building something worth preserving. Rex settled back into his protective position, head up and alert, ready to guard the pack while they rested. His stance was relaxed but ready, the posture of someone who knew that his vigilance mattered to the people he cared about. As evening approached and the mixed group began making their way back to the settlement, Keth9 found himself walking beside Rex, matching his pace to the animal's steady gait. The big creature looked up at him occasionally, checking to make sure he was still part of the group, still included in the protective formation. Rex, Keth9 said quietly. The animal's ears perked forward, and he made a soft sound that the translator interpreted as yes? Thank you. For teaching us what we never learned to value. Rex's response was simple and profound: pack is pack. Always protect pack. In the distance, Keth9 could see the lights of the human settlement where former enemies worked together to build something new. Where different species shared knowledge and resources not because they were forced to, but because they had learned that cooperation made everyone stronger. Where loyalty wasn't weakness, but the foundation of true power. As they walked through the alien forest under unfamiliar stars, surrounded by the sounds of multiple species living in harmony, Keth9 realized that he was exactly where he belonged. Not because he'd been conquered or defeated, but because he'd finally found a place where being part of something larger than himself made him more than he'd ever been alone. Behind them, the forest was already healing the scars left by Zara's crashed pod. New growth was emerging from damaged Earth, life adapting and thriving in the way that planets did when they weren't being strip-mined or sterilized for military advantage. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't superior firepower or advanced technology. It was the simple conviction that everyone deserved protection, and the willingness to make that protection real. Rex had taught them that strength wasn't about being the biggest predator in the forest. Strength was about making sure nobody in your pack ever had to face that predator alone.